Why do some people succeed in life while others fall short of their full potential? The answer to this question has broad implications when it comes to sports, business, and even life in general. And of course, by answering this question, not only can we help improve ourselves and our own odds for success, but it can also help us when it comes to recruiting better teammates, identifying better business partners, and helping others develop and grow. So to answer this question, let's take a look at 3 of my favorite insights from Grit by Angela Duckworth, beginning with insight number 1. Grit predicts success better than natural talent. When making predictions about the potential success of other people around us, we often tend to focus on assessing their natural talent. We start focusing on their strengths, possibly their weaknesses, and because we have such a natural bias towards innate ability and valuing these kinds of attributes, oftentimes we turn to natural talent as some kind of an indicator for future success. But unfortunately, there's a very big gap between having natural talent and putting in the effort required to capitalize on that talent and to actually accomplish meaningful objectives in life. And as I'm sure you've experienced, there are people out there that clearly have natural talent, but for one reason or another, they're not capitalizing on that talent and they aren't achieving things in life. So because of this fact, talent alone is not a very accurate predictor for the future success of someone. Now, in the book, the author Angela Duckworth also explored a number of other possibilities, including historical achievements and recent progress, and even things like blind luck. But unfortunately, none of these other elements, and there were several others covered in the book, none of them really achieved great predictive power. So they might have been relevant, they might have been useful, but they weren't really useful when it came specifically to making an accurate prediction around someone's future potential. Instead, what Angela Duckworth discovered is that a better predictor was grit, a unique blend of passion and perseverance. Now, when it comes to passion, this is about consistency when it comes to our goals or our objectives in life over an extended period of time. And when it comes to perseverance, this, of course, relates to our ability to invest effort and to overcome difficult challenges and to complete the things that we start in life. Now, when it comes to measuring grit, Angela Duckworth put together the Grit Scale, a simple questionnaire to assess passion and perseverance. And in the end, this scale proved to be a very accurate predictor in a range of scenarios, including West Point's 7-week boot camp, retention of salespeople over time, higher GPAs when controlling for SAT scores, the completion of graduate degrees, and even the advancement in a spelling bee for kids. Now, interestingly enough, talent was not an accurate predictor for grit. So as I mentioned earlier, these two things are not actually linked. You can have someone who is incredibly talented and gifted with innate ability, and on the other hand, for one reason or another, they might not have the persistence and the follow-through to take advantage of that natural ability when it comes to actually achieving things in life. So with that in mind, let's continue on to insight number 2. When it comes to achievement, effort counts twice. What we achieve in any given area of life ultimately comes down to 2 critical factors. There's talent and there's effort. Now, talent relates to the speed at which we can take on new skills or new abilities. So our innate ability, our strengths, our weaknesses, and how that impacts our ability to learn something perhaps a little bit faster than other people. When it comes to effort, this is really the work that we put in to both develop and apply our skills in life. Now, one really important thing to note, and this is one of my favorite takeaways from the entire book, is that effort counts twice and often at the very same time. So for example, when we set out to accomplish specific goals and we put in effort, effort not only helps us accomplish those goals, but at the very same time, it helps us improve the related skills that are required to achieve those goals. So not only are we making real progress in life, but at the very same time, often we're improving our ability in that particular area. And to kind of summarize these 2 different situations, there are 2 powerful equations that are covered in the book, which are talent times effort equals skill, and skill times effort equals achievement. Now, it's worth noting that there are other factors beyond the elements of these simple equations. For example, your ability to improve can, of course, be impacted by having a great coach or a mentor or a teacher. And there are other factors like blind luck that in certain situations can, in fact, play an outsized role. But the core idea here is that talent alone isn't enough. And when we focus on talent, when we think that talent is the end-all be-all of success, then we can ultimately fail to pursue certain areas of life where we might be lacking natural talent. And meanwhile, effort plays a dual role. Not only does it help us apply our natural talents in a productive way, but simultaneously it helps us improve and develop our skills over time. Now, the relevance of grit here is that grit really sets the right conditions for continued effort over an extended period of time. So when we have grit, we're far more likely to invest the effort that is required for achieving success in life. So with that in mind, let's continue on to insight number 3, the 4 psychological assets of grit paragons. Grit develops as we begin to gain life experience. More specifically, as we begin to shape our life philosophy, learn to recover from setbacks, and clarify the high-level goals that are worthy of our perseverance in life. So, here are the 4 psychological assets that mature paragons of grit tend to have in common. First comes interest. Passion begins with an intrinsic enjoyment of what you do. So while some aspects may be more enjoyable than others, it's important that you're captivated by the endeavor as a whole. Next comes the capacity to practice. One key form of perseverance is the daily discipline of investing effort to improve. So as interest develops, it's critical to devote yourself to deliberate practice that leads towards mastery. Third is purpose. Passion is driven by doing work that matters. It's difficult to sustain effort without finding purpose in your work. Now, it's ideal to pursue work that is both personally rewarding and connected to the well-being of others. Fourth is hope. Hope defines and enhances the other 3 elements, and it helps us keep going even when things inevitably become very difficult. Now, fortunately, it is possible to develop all 4 of these assets. We can learn to discover, develop, and deepen our interests. We can acquire the habit of disciplined practice. We can cultivate a sense of purpose and meaning. And finally, we can teach ourselves to be hopeful. And naturally, the book covers many tips and insights for developing grit. Now, before we actually wrap up this summary, I quickly want to cover some potential misconceptions regarding grit. In discussing the book with other people over the years, and even reflecting back on my first impressions after originally reading the book several years ago, there is room, I believe, for some misunderstanding when it comes to some of the key ideas covered in the book. So I thought it would be helpful to quickly explore 3 potential misconceptions that might come up either as you go through this summary or as you go through the entire book. So, misconception number 1. People with grit complete everything that they start. It's easy to make the mistake of assuming that grit is associated with a never quit or never give up attitude. And especially when you look at some of the sections that talk about perseverance, it might be tempting to think that this is blind perseverance. In other words, once you've committed to something, then you must simply see it through. But this really fails to understand the context of the book, because the idea behind grit is ultimately to get clear on the things that truly matter to you and to understand your higher level goals, the things that really matter, and to separate that out from your lower level or non-crucial goals. So the fact is, gritty people quit things all the time. When they identify something isn't really critical to their big picture objectives, then They're quick to set it aside or to give up early because it's not important. Whereas on the other hand, if something is critical or is important to their big picture goals and their ambitions in life, that is where they tend to persevere and push through and overcome difficult challenges. So much of grit comes down to simply having clarity around the things that are worthy of your persistence so that you can invest the effort necessary to overcome difficult challenges in those situations. Misconception number 2, natural talent isn't real, so we can just ignore it. Now, I hope I've clarified this here in the summary, but if, for example, someone has just discussed the idea of grit with you or they flip through the book really quickly, they might be left with the impression that natural talent either isn't real or that it doesn't matter. And this is not at all the message of the book. Natural talent is a real thing. We do have innate abilities. The message here is simply that natural talent alone isn't an accurate predictor of future potential. It's not enough to achieve meaningful results in life. We must pair it with effort. And effort ultimately not only allows us to capitalize on our natural strengths, but also to improve and develop them over time. So that is the message here. We do have natural abilities, but at the end of the day, effort can play an outsized role in not only predicting our future success, but in making it happen. And that's where grit really comes into play, because when we are gritty, we're far more likely to consistently put in the effort required to achieve success, and in some cases, to actually overcome our lack of natural ability in certain areas. Misconception number 3, we should aim to identify our passion early in life. Well, it may be tempting after reading a book like this to want to quickly identify your purpose or your passion in life or the area in which you have the most amount of grit. It's a big mistake to rush the process, either for yourself or for other people that you care about, including your kids or others that you might be mentoring, because, well, there are ways that you can foster grit. Much of this comes down to exploring possibilities. And so people that tend to develop grit in life first set out to explore many different interests. They don't rush the process. They don't try to quickly identify their passion. In fact, in many cases, they will identify something and continue to explore only to later come back and realize that was indeed their passion in life. So it's very critical that we do not shortcut this exploratory part of the process. So if you are interested in fostering grit and doing so more effectively, you can begin by sowing the seeds of interests, by trying many things, by exploring many different possibilities. And when something seems interesting to you, that's where you can dive in and invest some time to practice and develop and move towards mastery. And if that does turn out to be your passion, then of course you can continue down that road, but you don't want to shortcut the process. You want to continue to explore, sow the seeds of interest, develop some mastery, and ultimately determine where it is that you have the greatest amount of grit. But anyway, those are 3 of my favorite insights from Grit by Angela Duckworth. If you have any questions or comments about anything that we covered here, let me know down in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe and visit rickkettner.com. That's where you can go to discover the very best books for entrepreneurs.